Yeah, we are live. Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome to Academy of Astrology UK live stream podcast. Well, today with me is Mandi, and I believe Marcus will come later. And who is that?
We've got a stand in here in case Marcus doesn't have a lot to say, but he looks cute. So
Yeah.
although Marcus looks cute and he has a lot to say, so let's hope Marcus turns up.
So, Mandi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really great. Very busy. I am putting together my presentation because with Dr. Lee Lehman,
Yes.
I'm doing the first talk of the Pluto in Aquarius events.
Oh, I
So that's going to
really
be very
forget
exciting.
that.
On Saturday, the 26th of November. That's right.
Yeah.
Saturday,
Yes,
the 26th of November, with Rod
Yeah.
is going to be hosting and also
Yeah.
hosting the Q&A afterwards. It's two talks on Pluto and Aquarius with Dr.
Yes.
Lee
Yeah.
and myself both doing a talk. It's absolutely
We
brilliant. Are you going to put the
read.
details underneath the
Yeah,
video
the
for people
detail
to find
underneath the
out more?
video. So yes, exactly.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
yes. So apart from this project, oh, we got a Marcus. So apart from this project, what are you doing, preparing at least apart from the talk, and anything along the preparing the talk?
Yeah, preparing the talk, obviously, and I'm also working on writing and recording some meditations based on the elements, so one for each element, because as you know, in astrology, people have an elemental mix in their charts, and some people are strong in one element and weak in another element, and these meditations are designed to sort of tune you into your weaker elements and bolster your stronger elements, basically, and also general meditations on the elements. So all good fun, all good guided meditations, all good fun. Working on that, taking bookings for clients, and working on a new concept, which I'm not able to say any more about that at the moment.
Okay.
But launch hopefully in the next few months.
Okay. So Marcus, hey.
Sorry, I'm late, guys. Hi.
That's all right. So I'm just chatting with Mandi before you log in, because I just like give everyone some idea whether we are busy now, whether we are prepared now, because end of November we have one webinar, and then also Mandi is prepare her recording the meditation. I feel quite interesting, quite fascinating. I really want to know more about that. How about you? What are you prepared at this moment? Do you have any talk or any webinar coming soon?
Yes, I do. I mean, one is for Kepler College in so is this cool because they're like a rival school?
Yeah, please. No. I think we should. I like one sentence that before your time come, you should approach for everyone else.
Yeah, so, I agree. I think that's the best attitude. Just like there's more than enough to go around. So
yes, please.
Yeah. So, but it's Kepler College. It's online, and I'm doing a little course there beginning in February, on just consultation charts and Decumbiture, which is like medical charts. So it's like a little medical astrology course. So it's pretty specialized. So anybody who's interested in that, it's for more like you need to know a bit of astrology. So it's not for complete newbies. We do have a little medical course at Kepler for that as well, but that's what I'm doing. That's the only upcoming thing. So I'm just putting the finishing touches to that. Yeah,
I can write a testimony because Marcus was teaching similar things in Asia several years ago, and it was fascinating. Really, the best, one of the best I know. So I highly recommend, if you really want to learn the commentary and the horaric question related to medicine, this would be a great course to attend it. Maybe we should prepare like something similar later.
That'd be cool.
That'd be so cool. Yep. So, but this is not what we are doing today. But it's always nice to have a little bit of advertising and a little bit chit chat.
What about you, Rod? What are you up to?
Yeah.
What's cooking?
Oh, cooking. Cooking. What cooking? Well, I'm really focused. At this moment, I'm really focused on the full webinar with Mandi and Dr. Lee Lehman, and then Fernanda with Limbell, and then Alejo with the Dari Costello, and then eventually in February there's Leah McCarthy with the Christine Skinner, which is like it's so many people. And also, I prepare once a month. I started now with once a month have a short podcast with Christine Skinner. That was so interesting. Listen about she's talking about stock market and not only just financial, but really because that's her specialty. So it was so interesting, and we have more program. I just realized I have to, prepare. It's November now. I have to prepare for next year. So like,
when are you planning to clone yourself, Rod, to get all these done? I mean, that's amazing.
That's that. Well, I don't know, but I need to, I need to set the time and to prepare to set everything and prepare for next year.
Now you've got Mars in Capricorn, proper workhorse. You'll be good. You'll get it done.
Yeah. It wouldn't be. Yeah, as long as I have time.
yeah. It'll happen.
Yeah. So,
Mars in Capricorn is great, isn't it? Mars in Capricorn is great. Yeah. Unless you're kind of lazy, then it's not. It needs you to work, doesn't it? Mars in Capricorn. I'm quite envious of your Mars in Capricorn, actually.
Yeah.
I've got a silly Sun in Capricorn.
I think any planet in Capricorn kind of makes you more workaholic. I just think Mars is the most efficient. I think in order of efficiency in terms of this lineup, it goes Rod, Mandi, me. Because I'm like Rod's Mars, Mandi's the Sun, and I'm the Moon. So I've got the Moon in detriment, and Rod, you've got Mars exalted. I think they're all kind of workaholic, but it's just like the modus operandi of each one is different because they're different planets. So it's where that workaholism comes out and how it's expressed. So
I think there's a real drive and a passion with Mars in Capricorn that drives the hard work, isn't there? We're going a little bit off topic here, but that's what's quite fun about doing this.
Well, we talk about Mars and the
other thing, if you don't mind me saying, Rod, your please. Mars in Capricorn is at 0 Capricorn, is that right? Which is the Aries that pushes you out into the public, which is, why you're famous. And how many books have you got in Mandarin at the moment? About 30 books? Something like that?
In Mandarin, something like 30-ish.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's but I think that's I really, it's just like other people say, but have you done anything in English? I tried so hard, but I couldn't.
You've done. You're setting this up. Hello, running a school. Anyway,
running a school.
True. You're right. Well, okay. Should we bring the topic? So today we're going to focus on eclipse, especially lunar eclipse. And during last week, while Mandi and Marcus met each other, you talking about them. Should we bring some basic things? Some of Marcus' friends suggest we should talk about a little bit basic.
Yeah, just in that while we're talking about the charts, we'll try and explain some of our terminology a little bit more. Because obviously there's some of the people listening will be astrologers or will be familiar with it, and some people won't. And the feedback that I got for someone who was totally new to astrology was that they found the podcast really entertaining and interesting, but some of the terminology went right over the head. So it'd be useful to
So I think it's quite interesting, especially when I prepare today's podcast. And I have this problem: is every year, twice a year, I have to say, twice a year, when I face the eclipse season, then I would say, why I don't have a beautiful diagram to explain solar eclipse and the lunar eclipses. So I think I should make one. And I will find the things, try so hard and make one. Then I will realize I already
have one.
Have lots of them. For previous 10 years, each year I will make one, and each year I think I didn't have one. So let me show you the chart I made today. Not only today, for last couple of years.
Excellent.
There's things like this. There's things like this. There's things like this, and I just made this today.
Oh, that's a really good one. That's really clear, isn't it?
Stunning.
Yeah. So I was just like, after I make this one, I say, have I done something before? Then I realized I make nearly once a year. So, well, how about let Mandi explain what is the basic, very basic lunar eclipse?
Okay, so basically, a lunar eclipse is a full moon. So we get a full moon once a month, right? But it's a special full moon. And a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth passes between the sun and the moon, which in an astrological chart, when the sun and the moon are in opposition, it's a full moon. When the sun and the moon are in opposition, with the Earth passing between them, that is a lunar eclipse. So basically, it's a supercharged full moon, basically.
Yes, it is.
In essence.
In essence. And very interesting because we mentioned about the new moon related to solar eclipse and the full moon related to lunar eclipse. That one essential thing in the chart, because each year we will have like more than 12 full moon and a new moon, but only 2 or 3 eclipse, probably not more than 4, and then 3, 4. Sometimes you can get 5 lunar eclipse, but you have like more than 12 full moon. The essential bit when you read in the chart is about node, south node and north node in the chart. Because when the new moon happens around the nodal axis, that's the solar eclipse. And when the full moon happens around the nodal axis, would be the lunar eclipse. That's because, what does that mean? Because the nodal axis is the ecliptic, the moon's orbit, and where the moon's orbit meets the ecliptic. So when the sun and the moon are at this position, they are kind of a level up, they kind of meet each other. Then at this time, either Earth can block the sunlight or moon can block the sunlight to the moon. And this is the basic idea. So the new moon related to solar eclipse and the full moon with the lunar eclipse. Marcus, do you want to add anything in?
No, I'm just skipping ahead and searching for eclipse paths and stuff because that I guess there is something I'd like to add then, yes, which is just that eclipses, because of this astronomical phenomenon that you've just been describing, they will be depending where you live on the Earth. Where whether you're facing towards the sun or the moon or not, you're going to get the fullness of the eclipse, a total eclipse, so some parts of the Earth, when there's an eclipse, are going to be falling right under the shadow of that eclipse, right in the line of the sun and moon when they're lined up in that way, and other parts aren't. So I guess that's all I'd like to add, because that's important for the astrological interpretation of eclipses.
Yes. It is very interesting because I think that's when we interpret the eclipse, me and Marcus have a slightly different way. So because Marcus will be follow the Ptolemy and the traditional way, and which stunning, very very interesting, and I like the idea is where you can see the eclipses has a more direct impact, and then usually when I read the eclipse chart, doesn't matter solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, and I doesn't care. I really doesn't care. Can you see it or not? I'm just like, there's impact here.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to be clear though, that we're talking about that traditional thing about whether you can see it or not. That's really on the mundane level. That's on the world level. Like, and also it's whether if it's picking up a point in your chart, you'll feel it. Doesn't matter whether the eclipse is definitely visible on the other side of the world, you'll feel it. And the same, interestingly, applies to the charts of countries. So that makes this weird little get out clause, this little asterisk, because if you've got a country where, the eclipse is happening on the other side of the world, so classically, traditionally, that eclipse isn't going to affect that country. But if that eclipse is sitting right on the angle, say it's a lunar eclipse and the moon is right on the IC, so it's like, that it's happening on the other side of the world at midnight, you're it's going to have a massive effect on that country because it's really sitting on an angle in their chart. So there is this little asterisk I'd like to point out. So maybe, as is often the case when you look at these things more closely, the traditional and the modern don't have to be like loggerheads. There's often
no need.
Yeah.
I agree. And what's interesting, Marcus, what you said about traditionally, you know, what applies on the mundane level, i.e. world astrology, countries, leaders, kings, queens, etc. That was how eclipses were originally interpreted, that they did affect the kings, the queens, the country themselves, the rulership. They weren't interpreted originally. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus.
No, 100%.
Yeah. They weren't interpreted originally to have an impact on people's lives through sort of, you know, connecting with a natal chart, for example. And an eclipse, obviously, they didn't understand it. Most people didn't understand it astronomically like we do. It's an astronomical phenomenon. So the light goes out, and that's kind of terrifying. And the point I wanted to make is that because it's kind of frightening, like, oh my God, the sun's gone. What's happened? They didn't understand why, but they know it happens occasionally, and it's kind of this portent of doom traditionally. I think in the collective sort of consciousness, I think there's still that kind of fear around eclipses.
Kind of
yes, you know, your connections a bit shaky, Mandy,
so,
but I think your internet is channeling eclipse energy. It's like it's the connections going in and out a bit.
When you mentioned about this, I have definitely share one story with you.
The lights will go off soon.
Yeah. I have to share one story with you guys. Was last Wednesday, and I was doing a live stream podcast with Isabella from Poland. And then so once a week I have like a meet up one astrologer on Instagram, we chat, and then we were supposed to talking about solar eclipse, and then but the technical problem anyway, we couldn't connect each other. Suddenly Isabella called me, so I saw that was online, so we were just like talk for 1 hour with that conversation, and I saw it was online, so I saw people were watching the podcast. No, that was just a phone call for 1 hour. We talked to each other without recording.
Oh no! Got it.
When we realized that, we said, "Should we do it again?" Yes. So we half hour later we come back online and do it again. We saw a shorter version, and that was another eclipse phenomenon.
Yeah, it's weird, but sort of between two eclipses, and also off topic slightly, we've got the Mars retroing in Gemini, and I've certainly been found that's been causing a few tech issues. Interestingly, you know, where having to redo things and frustrations with tech. I think it's sort of a bit like a Mercury retrograde, but it's not like I'm getting loads of parcels coming back or like the emails, but there's frustrations with tech is another theme there, sort of, you know. So anyway. Exactly.
Well, this eclipse is quite interesting. I think should we go through the basic idea about lunar eclipse?
Yes, I think that's a good setup.
Okay, Marcus, do you want to start it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just the basic principle. I won't belabor this because we want to get onto the chart and actually have a look at the chart that's coming up. But essentially, if in a solar eclipse, the moon is interposited, is between the Earth and the Sun. In a lunar eclipse, the Earth is between the Sun and the Moon. So in other words, the Moon is on the sort of far side of the Earth in terms of its orbit, and the Sun is on the other side, and they are lining up in the sense that, as you talked about, Rod, the Earth is going around the Sun on what we call the ecliptic. That's the plane of its orbits. Like if they're both on the tabletop, the Sun will be a big beach ball, and the Earth will be a little pea rolling around the beach ball, and the tabletop is the ecliptic. And then when you get an eclipse, it's like the moon is exactly on the tabletop when it's revolving around the Earth, so it's lined up with the Sun, so that people who would be in a lunar eclipse, the moon is on one side of the Earth is in the middle, sort of thing, and then very, very far away on that side is the Sun, but they're all lined up so that when it's midnight, on the people who are on the side of the Earth where the moon is are looking up into the sky. Some of them will see exactly the Earth's shadow cast onto the moon and making the moon look completely blacked out. So, but obviously it'll depend where they live. If they're living a little bit not directly in line in that lineup, they're going to be a little bit over to the side. They'll see a partial eclipse. But yeah. So anyway, that's broadly my slightly cereal box explanation of lunar eclipse. So.
And lunar eclipses are generally easier to see than well, you can't look directly at a lunar eclipse, of course, because you can't look directly at the sun. But lunar eclipses are...
Oh, Mandy's connection. Yeah.
It's really beautiful to watch, actually. I can break it up again a bit.
Little bit, but it's okay. We got it. Is that you're just saying that they're easier to see and they're quite beautiful, basically, lunar eclipses. Yeah,
it's quite an interesting. It's beautiful phenomenon to watch. But the nodes are in phenomenon. The nodes are really important, aren't they, in in an eclipse, in any eclipse. So depending on whether it's the north node or the south node next to the moon, close to the moon, also gives the eclipse its unique flavor, basically. And the nodes, I guess the way to think about the nodes is that the nodes in an eclipse, they're kind of act like sort of energetic portals through which the sort of energy of the eclipse comes through. And another point to note is that we've said a lunar eclipse is like a full moon. We know a full moon, the effects of a full moon lasts a couple of weeks or so at most, whereas an eclipsed full moon can last for months. And there's lots of different traditional rules and lots of, and in modern astrology, lots of rules about how long an eclipse affects and is in effect and all that kind of thing. That gets quite complicated, but
it does. But no, that's a really good point, Mandy. That just to mention, they're sometimes called the nodes of the moon or the lunar nodes, and they're just like, all they are really astronomically is the place where the orbit of the moon around the Earth intersects with the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun. So there's 2 points, and they're basically where the eclipses happen, and they gradually shift around the ecliptic. So there's a 19-year cycle, I think approximately 19 years, isn't it, Saros cycle, where the eclipses will sort of happen in all the signs, and the nodes move backwards through the signs. So they're basically just where eclipses happen, and we call one's north, one's south, and the north node is, I think, where the moon is rising up into northern hemisphere, and south node is where it's in its orbit around the Earth, it's going down into the south. So, and they have different meanings. So that's that.
Yeah. I think traditionally there is the meaning about. I mean, what I say is the when we interpret the eclipse, they are different between. We have differentiate between solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. They bring different ways. They both shocking. They both bring something, make people like feel like a surprise or something. Because one is a new moon, solar eclipse, and one is the full moon, the lunar eclipse. So when we interpret it, it's that different way to keep the meaning.
I agree. I think I always think of the solar that you've heard this classic, like it's like a new moon on steroids or a full moon on steroids or something. I've heard that a few times, and I'm like, yeah, kind of. I mean, they're just like, they're like new moon, a beginning of things, a beginning of a new cycle, and a full moon is a fruition or a coming, like everything's out on the table sort of thing. But these are with, as you say, Rod, with the added disruption. That's a really key eclipse word. It's this disruption or surprise element of an eclipse. And when they hit you or a country or a thing, when they affect a person, often they'll bring in significant shifts in the direction, life direction of that entity or thing or whatever it is.
Mandy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just what Marcus said basically about the difference between a solar and a lunar. And then, of course, this one that we're going to look at shortly is a north node lunar eclipse. So add to that, if it's a north node eclipse, it's about a new energy coming in. I mean, this, when we look at the chart, I'm sure we'll all agree that it is.
Should we?
Super
disruptive. Bring the chart in, and then yes.
Yeah.
Mandi, what do you say?
Yeah, super disruptive. I mean, we've got Uranus there, unexpected shocks, surprises, disruption, with Uranus right on that eclipse there. But because it's a north node, the north node is on the moon, which is on the eclipse, which is basically it's the head of the dragon. It's about ingesting, it's about new energy, the intake of new energy, and something new coming in, but also that is disruptive, that might feel disruptive at first, but could ultimately be positive. But you don't tend to see that. I think it's a misnomer to go, oh my goodness, 8th of November 2022, I've got this eclipse on. I don't know, I don't have it very strong in my chart, but say I've got it on my Venus. Oh, something's going to happen with romance or money on that day. That's not quite how it works with eclipses and in transits in general. There's obviously sort of a period of all sort of transits are processes and take time. So just to sort of go back to that thing I said, don't be terrified, if it's on your Saturn or something like that, don't be terrified that something awful is going to happen just right on that day or at all. Everything's open to
or if it's on your ascendant, which it is mine. my ascendant degree is 12-13 Scorpio, so pretty close. I agree with all of that, Mandi. Although, just to play devil's advocate slightly, and I think you probably agree with this, because it's got Uranus there. Uranus is if you see the moon at the bottom in Taurus, the little horseshoe shaped thing, that's the north node. And then opposite it, we've got the downward horseshoe, which is the south node. So that's just what those symbols mean. And then Uranus is the planet on the other side of the moon, the one that looks like a sort of antenna. And Uranus often does give this surprise thing. So I totally agree, Mandi, with what you say about these things are often processes and they don't always just happen on the day. But because Uranus is there, sometimes that Uranus-Saturn thing can have this sudden ka-choom. Do you know what I mean? It can have this sudden, bring this sort of sudden energy to it. So with Uranus-Saturn, it can be like a sudden break or a sudden stop or a sudden disruption or a sudden something. So Saturn words like blockage, blockage, obstruction, delay, break, contract, and then Uranus words like sudden, surprising, revolutionary. You know what I mean? So it can have that boom like. So normally I would say yes, and I think for most people this will definitely be part of a process, but there might be an event here. Although given Uranus is involved, it need not actually happen on the day, but it could be. Something.
The predictable thing about Uranus is that it's unpredictable.
It's predictably unpredictable.
Very nature. And we're talking about Taurus here. So if we're looking at kind of world events and following the news and that kind of thing around this eclipse, think of Taurian themes, basically. So the Taurus themes, it's things about the material world, money, banking, resources, food, especially because it's the moon as well. It's about being productive and useful. I said money, food, all that kind of thing. So these are some things to look out for with the themes of that eclipse. New energy coming in, changing in disruption.
All of that. And I was going to say yes. That was what I was going to add.
Farming,
land, yes, all of that. Land resources, just sort of disruption to those, and because it's an eclipse, disruption, north node, it's bringing something in. And I do feel like, because the tropical lunar mansion, which I always look at, the lunar mansions are just like a dividing up of the whole zodiac into, I think 20, or I always forget the number. I've been doing this for years, I forget the number every time, but 20 odd sections, 27 to 24, I don't know, I can't remember. But the lunar mansion this one is in, because I looked it up, is to do with contention. It's quite a contentious mansion, and the moon, the eclipse is, there's Mercury with the sun on the other end,
yes,
with Venus there a little bit, and it's squaring Saturn. So Saturn is I don't know if you can highlight Saturn or whatever, Rod, just for people who aren't familiar with. So Saturn's that guy there, squaring both ends of the eclipse, and Saturn always symbolizes blockages and delays and that kind of thing. And in Aquarius, it's a social sign. So we could see here things that are already being talked about, a disruption in food supply, disruption in basic sort of provisions potentially, and also some disruption in communication of those things. But interestingly, because it's a new, it's a north node eclipse, it will bring in delays and blockages, and I think that disruption will eventually implement new systems of some sort for handling these kinds of crises. So it's like some sort of disruption that will bring in some kind of new, possibly involving technology, because that's often Uranus, sort of way of dealing with this. Does that jive with what you guys think?
A new way to control things, because
yes,
is very much that Taurus Scorpio axis. The sun, you've got at the top of the chart there in the 10th house, you've got the sun in Scorpio along with Mercury in Scorpio along with Venus in Scorpio. That could talk about trade routes because of Mercury. It could talk about money changing hands and assets and resources because of Venus. Venus in Scorpio isn't particularly happy in the sign of Scorpio, so sort of disruptions around that kind of thing. Things, travel, if we're talking about food and resources and money, things not sort of getting through, and more controls needing to come in, or wanting to have more control but losing control because Uranus is there.
Yes, but it's interesting because I do think that I all of that, Mandi, that's brilliant. I think it'll also bring in, because I do that the North Node increases and expands and materializes. It brings stuff in on a physical level. So I think it's going to do all that, and then that might result in some new things being put in place to address those things. So that might be ultimately positive, but the eclipse itself is going to be signaling some disruption, I think. So yeah.
Totally agree. Totally. And with Saturn involved as well, of course, nothing tends to happen particularly quickly when Saturn is involved. But when Uranus is involved, things want to happen quickly. So there you've got the rub, there you've got the conflict between we need to control whatever situation it is, but we're going to have to work it through it slowly and be patient, and Uranus wants it done now. And I think don't panic, I think is the message to the world.
One thing I agree with Mandi and Marcus. One thing is very interesting is this lunar eclipse, because this T-square we're talking about is in the fixed sign, and the fixed sign usually acts slowly, or even just like they delay the action. And one thing I noticed is this would be the last time. One last time this set of a Saturn square Uranus is that close, because they beginning their approach to square each other things early last year, and then now it's like one last time they get this close, and they were like Marcus say, they were separate. They were separate. So this is the one last time they get so close, and then we got lunar eclipse to trigger it. So it means like these two planets, the clash of Titan between the two, between the new god and old god, between the new system and old system, between the freedom and then the security feeling, are all holding one last battle, and then going to be triggered. I'm not talking about the end of the world or war or something. No, it's not like
it's stuff that's already been happening, Rod, isn't it? I mean, indeed. So like you mentioned the timing, like we had one last Christmas, right? Really just before Christmas last year. And then the other one, can you remember when the other Saturn Uranus square exact was?
It was the early 2021. I think January, February, and then June, and then Christmas, and then I think around February, and then May, and now again.
Right. So in other words, all of those dates that Rod just mentioned, we had exact connections between Saturn and Uranus. This time they're not going to connect, but this is like that aspect is going out with a bang, with this, because the eclipse is making out is finalizing that connection. I have to say, this whole Saturn Uranus set of squares has been excruciating for me personally. So I'm really looking forward to being over, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I think that's another point to make, actually, generally, about eclipses. They act as triggers. So if they fall in your chart, or they fall, we have obviously the moving transit between this long running square between Saturn and Uranus. And as you said, it's the last one in a series, because of the retrograde motion. You'll often, these outer planets, you'll get them doing, say, 3, sometimes even 5 conjunctions over a period of a year or whatever. And an eclipse on an ongoing transit will certainly trigger all the themes of that transit. And like you said, Marcus, it's going out with a bang,
Yeah.
Because it's the last square coming out, and it's triggered by an eclipse. So, and as we were saying earlier about sort of processes, of course, once the Saturn and Uranus squares are over, we'll all go, oh, thank goodness they're over. But the process that they initiated carries on, right?
Sure.
Indeed.
100%. And of course, that you inferred, Mandi, they are just part of an ongoing thing. So these are just peaks of a particular theme in the world. So in terms of what is going to be going out with a bang, we've talked about this many times before in previous podcasts, but it's that Saturn Uranus thing of Saturn is like the conventional authorities, social conventions, how things should be done, restrictions, controls, and all that. Uranus is the opposite, but here's Saturn in an air sign. It's all about social control and social convention and control of how people interact, how they think, what's normal, and sort of more. Generally speaking, Saturn is more conservative values, and people think of Aquarius as being a Uranian sign. Well, traditionally, actually, not necessarily. Saturn in Aquarius is much more conservative, I would say, and then Uranus, because it's Saturn, and then Uranus is being all sort of rebellious, but in Earth. So this is kind of this is played out in so many ways, but Uranus in Taurus is a bit Extinction Rebellion-y in a way, and people but also people just up in arms about prices of gas and food and things coming from the earth, and people getting and those things being unstable. Exactly. So
it's interesting. What comes to mind, figuratively speaking, when you think about Saturn and Uranus, is Uranus, as you said, Marcus, it's the rebellion, it's wanting the freedom, it's the freedom to have your say, to protest. You think about rebellion and protest. Not that's only just one of many themes of Uranus, but think about the protester wanting freedom, wanting fairness, wanting something to change, because Uranus always wants something to change, whether it wants to change or whether it needs to change at all. Still wants something to change. Whereas, so you've got these protesters out on the street. I'm talking figuratively here, I'm not making any predictions, but Saturn, Saturn is like the riot police with the shields trying to stop them. That's kind of the energy, and that can obviously go on psychologically within a person.
Yes, I was going to say on that level, it might be something like you encounter some sudden situation or a disruptive situation, which might affect your sense of material security. It might affect, oh my God, this might literally affect my ability to put food on the table, or it might make you feel threatened on that level. But then there's certain obligations and a protocol that you have to work through. There's certain shoulds that you need to do, like maybe there's a situation that arises that's shocking, that there's some obligation that you have to meet. So this can come in various forms. It can be like, you have been remiss in your duty of doing this, and now you have to fix this thing, and that kind of makes you feel all upset and rebellious and whatever, or there's a danger of you losing a position, or this can go in so many different ways. But there's that combination of unsettledness with security and material stuff, which might make you feel a bit rebellious, and it's a bit unpredictable. But then there's the Saturn element is you have to do this. These are the obligations that you have to fulfill, something like that.
Duty and responsibility, and that is Saturn, isn't it? Yeah. don't want to do that. I want to go out and have fun.
And
I don't care about the consequences. That's kind of the Uranian feel.
Yeah, we haven't.
And then you've got to pay for it with Saturn.
Yeah, always. We haven't really talked about all the Scorpio stellium end of this.
Yes,
it's with the South Node sort of getting drained out a little bit with Mercury and the Sun and Venus. It's like maybe your personal desires and what you want to say about your emotions and feelings in the matter and all of your sort of like strong stuff, you have to let go of that. That's like that's not going to help you here. You have to focus on the apex of this T-square. The point of it is the Saturn in Aquarius direct, very strong. This is what has to be done. This is the Saturn is necessity. It's like, okay, this is what you need to do it. This is what needs to be done. Just got to suck it up and do it. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for if there's Uranus is involved in anything. It's like, no. Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't have to be all bad. I think sometimes the results of a dignified Saturn can be quite good. In the end, it can sort of tighten up leaky boundaries socially. So if you've got any sort of any situation that's sort of like not been addressed socially or with contracts or with boundaries in some way, eclipse may confront you with those issues and be like, okay, this needs to be sorted now. So yeah.
And also this being a full moon lunar eclipse is obviously a full moon, as we've said. That can also come out through relationships, because full moon can always be about relationships. So on a personal level, with the Scorpio there, it might be, well, what's happening behind the scenes? What are people thinking? Am I not being told? What am I not saying? Secrets and that kind of thing as well. And as we said, Saturn likes to do things properly, and if Uranus hears a secret, it's going to blab it out, right? So
yeah.
Figuratively speaking, of course.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. I really like Marcus' take on the Scorpio things, because we this eclipse season, solar eclipse in the Scorpio and the lunar eclipse is also there. This is very interesting. It's about our what we feel, how we feel, and how can we let go of things. It's pretty difficult. It's a challenge, especially when we're facing this Saturn square Uranus. Yes, there's something new and something old. And if you're going to get rid of old things, sometimes you do have to recognize it. You have a feeling about it. And then without recognizing that feeling, it makes things a little bit more difficult to change, So sometimes we have to do a quick review about how far we come from, and then where are we now. And then, so we can understand the meaning of this journey, then we can let go.
Yeah, I agree. I've just had a thought about that as you were saying all that, Rod, about the letting go of whatnot. Because I've been looking at that Mars and Mercury in this chart. You have a generosity, because Mars is retro in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in Scorpio, which in old money, in old astrology, was ruled by Mars. So you've got a generosity between the two, and Mercury at 15 Scorpio is actually on this star called the South Scale, or Zuban El Ganubai, that doesn't show up in the chart. But that's kind of a naughty star that was said to have this sort of vibe of Mars and Saturn. It's sometimes called the insufficient price. So Mercury, don't forget, is traditionally the markets, because Mercury was the ruler of commerce and electronics and transactions and stuff like that. But so there could be financial ramifications to this eclipse, but we're also looking at, it was also the insufficient price in terms of, it was a bit slightly poisonous star. So what I'm thinking, this is about letting go of negative thoughts, of hostile thoughts. of things where you've kind of like you've dwelt on conflicts, or you've been ruminating on old hostilities, like the Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini it's retrograde, so it's going back over, and it's a verbal sign, and it's Mars, it's going back over hostile words, like so. And the exchange between those two is you've got Mercury, which is in Scorpio, which is an emotional sign. It's ruminating on, it's holding on to emotionally these hostile things that are exchanged. So on a personal level, one potentially positive, although not easy, positive outcome of this eclipse could be helping to confront people. And I see this in my own psychology at the moment, so it's just something that you've brought out by you're talking about letting go of those things, Rod. Maybe letting go of some ruminations, emotional ruminations on previous angry words or nasty things that were said, or old arguments that were had. And that would certainly fit with the sort of the moon in this mansion signifying conflict being sort of eclipsed and then squaring Saturn. It's kind of like, it's not going to do it in an easy way. It's like, okay, you're confronted with some situation, you might have to sort your boundaries out, make some changes, edit some things out of your life, but you might have to remove some particular thought patterns about certain people, some sort of negative ways that you were thinking about certain people or situations, and that could actually be quite useful, because Scorpio tends to get emotionally attached to things, and with the South Node there, you've got to let some of those things go. So. I
agree totally. That's fantastic, and it's about, I guess, the becoming aware of the emotional cost of holding on to these negative grudges, this bitterness, this resentments, and all of that. You know, that emotional cost, I think, is very much a kind of scorpionic kind of thing.
Thinking,
sort of Venus in Scorpio, you know, can be said to hold on, to pay a high emotional cost for holding on to, you know, grudges or wanting to sort of get revenge and that kind of thing. That's difficult. You know, people might, with Venus in Scorpio, I know some absolutely wonderful people with Venus in Scorpio who handle it beautifully, but there is the danger of that getting a little bit toxic in relationships sometimes.
It's really, I think all the I've got Venus in Aries, which is the other Mars sign. I think they're all prone to a little bit of envy. I think that's a really Venus, like with Mars vibe, envy, because Venus gets competitive, right? Do you know what I mean? And in Scorpio, it's the danger in Scorpio, as you say, man, you can hold on to some of slights or perceived imbalances in power and become really envious. So it could be about letting go of some of that, of just letting go of some of that too. There's a sort of letting go of negative stuff here going on in some way. But anyway,
cool. Wow, we've been talking about this chapel a little bit longer.
Well, it's a big one. So
it's a big one, to be honest. Yeah, it is. So, well, I think it's about time, but I don't want to finish like it. Before we go, maybe each one of us give a little tip about from this chart, a little, you know, practical tip to apply into the life of our audience. How about that?
Great.
Yeah, should we let Mandi start it?
A tip would be, don't worry, don't panic. Feel your emotions, feel what's coming through, try and do the right thing, give yourself a little bit of freedom if you can, even if it's just emotional freedom or space or physical space, getting out on your own or being on your own or whatever, because Uranus likes to have space and freedom, right? And I think the general sort of advice I'd give is just treat yourself kindly and treat everybody else kindly. That's always good advice for anyone, anytime.
Yeah. That's
Marcus?
I would second what Mandi just said, and I think this is really continuing the theme of, we haven't mentioned it really yet, but the Mars-Saturn trine, with Mars and sort of Gemini trining Saturn. That's a friendly relationship, which we talked about in last month's podcast. The sort of social editing trine. So I'll just go back and say what I said already. I think this eclipse could be a good time to go over if you've been ruminating on or chewing on or holding on to some verbal conflict or some nasty stuff that happened socially. This is a really good time to start to let go of that and to really work through it by practically just sorting out what lessons you need to learn from it, what social boundaries need to change. Do you need to do a little bit of editing, a little bit of pruning in your social life, which you don't have to do in a harsh way, but sometimes you could be like, actually, these people are not good for me. They're not good for my mental health. Let's not associate so much with them. And it doesn't have to be a nasty thing. That could be a letting go of negative contacts in your life, which you don't have to do with a massive door slam. You can do it with just a gentle letting go. But I think so. What Mandi said about kindness is not exclusive with doing some self work on your own mental processes and how you think about things, and doing some social work, just tightening up your social boundaries a little bit, and just doing what needs to be done, and just kind of putting your head down and doing it. So it's kind of like letting go of whining and complaining and moaning about stuff internally and externally, and just doing what needs to be done. And I think you come out of this a lot stronger.
Oh, I'll add to that, Marcus, as well. Yeah, sorry. I'll add to that, Marcus, as well as just social contacts as well. I would also add some family stuff as well, because you've got Saturn is obviously associated with sort of father figures, authority figures, and Sun and Moon as well are also associated with the parental things, father, mother, that kind of thing. So I'd also sort of, your recommendations, totally, Marcus, is brilliant. But yeah, that might also apply in the familial sense as well.
Yeah, all of this depending on your own personal context, like we're not saying if you've got a great relationship with your family and everything's great, we're not saying cut them off, it's just like
what?
Yeah, because
we're not talking about cutting people off.
No.
Like you said, Marcus, it's about sort of working on it mentally, and it's about working.
It's more about the internal thing, and then how do you make the boundaries in your life stronger, the social boundaries stronger and more appropriate? And that's partly an inside job, and that inside job is letting go of the negative, angry, ruminating, going back over old nonsense. And the other part of that is actually just working on your external boundaries a little bit. So if there are people who are getting in a bit too much, who maybe shouldn't be getting in so much, maybe just put a few more no access signs, So yeah, all of that.
I read something recently about setting boundaries that really made sense and really made me realize how important it is to set boundaries with people and with situations. When you set boundaries with people, you teach people how you want to be treated by them.
Yes.
That's kind of, I guess, what you're alluding to. But I think I've just read that quite recently. That way of looking at it really makes a lot of sense, and it makes it somehow, I think some people find it very hard to say no and set boundaries. Whereas couched like that kind of makes it a little bit easier. Because actually we're doing them a favor as well, because we're teaching them that I want to be treated with this level of respect, or my time is important as anybody else's. It's a useful concept for me anyway. Definitely. I've been using it.
Definitely.
It is so interesting, because I just want to add something. It's pretty light. It's light-hearted things. Just before we start this podcast, I was preparing dinner, and I was browsing my phone to read some gossip news or something. What's quite interesting, they're talking about two movie stars working together. One is the actress. I think her name is Millie Bobby Brown, who is a pretty young lady who is famous from the Stranger Things on Netflix. And then her another work is Elona Hormos, who was also on the Netflix, and a pretty nice film series. I really like it, because the second movie is coming out. She was talking about her boundary with her colleague. She said in the Stranger Things, with all those young actress, they are kind of grow up together. So there's no boundary between them. They are just like brother and sister. They can fight, they can argue, they can talk about everything, they can gossip about everything. But her friendship, she said she had a friendship with Henry Cavill, the Superman, who was who was portrayed Sherlock Holmes as her brother in the film. And she said, we have a very good friendship, but that is so different. There is a boundary there. Henry Cavill teach her boundaries. He has told her that, shut up, Millie. And I was like, when you both mentioned about the boundary and the friendship, I was like, why I read that things?
That's classic because of in contemporary astrology, Aquarius is often associated with friendships, which I think is not wrong, because it's an air sign, and air signs are social. So social boundaries, I mean, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Well, it's so nice to working with you guys, and then once a month we will bring you some interesting transit and important transit, and also some important event what we are doing at this moment. But don't forget this month and 26th November, Mandi and Dr. J Lee Lehman will have a webinar at AOAUK. We're talking about Pluto in Aquarius, and this is a huge thing going to happen next year. And if you're curious of what's going to happen, please come to join us. And then I will leave the enroll link here, so you have more idea about what we're going to talk about. And also, if you're interested in the complementary chart and medicine astrology, Marcus has a course with Kepler, right?
Kepler, Kepler College USA.
With Kepler College. So that is fantastic. I think if you really like medical astrology as a complementary, please go. You will not disappoint it. I love it so much. Okay, thanks.
By the way, Marcus is brilliant. So,
thanks, guys.
So,
back at you. So
we're kind of
go, exactly. Mutual support system. Go to how is he? I mean, this is an off-camera conversation.
Yeah, no, we can't.
It's nice to see him. Nice to see him looking.
Yeah, let me say goodbye to everyone. And then next week we have our usual horoscope. So astrologer from all around the world. Especially this time we have a special. Is our regular guest, but she bring a special topic. Going to talk about Anna Andrea going to talk about the transit between 2023 to 2030, and related to the chart of the US, China, and Latin America. There's some important planetary cycle are going to repeat, especially in the major city of Latin America. And that is so fantastic. She showed me the presentation. I was just like, oh my God, I'm so looking forward to watch that. So next Friday, please join us on the horoscope, and that would be so interesting. Okay, so see you next time. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.